Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 5 wide receiver start or sit decisions for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, I'm going to be going in depth into every single game from Thursday Night Football all the way until Monday Night Football, and I'll be telling you guys whether I believe you should start or sit the notable wide receivers in every single matchup. But before we get on into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to my channel and you do end up enjoying it, please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I'd also like to ask, if you guys are on Twitter, to please follow me on there at NotoriousFNTSY. The link to my Twitter is also down below in the description of today's video. So without further ado, let's get into things. We begin with Thursday Night Football between the LA Rams and the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. In this game, I'm going to be starting both Cooper Kupp as well as Robert Woods. Now, week number 4, Cooper Kupp finally has that down game, right, where he doesn't play super amazing like in week 1, week 2, and week number 3. But guess what? Just because he has one bad game doesn't mean that you need to run away from Cooper Kupp. Doesn't mean that you need to bench Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is still the most valuable wide receiver, in my opinion, on this LA Rams offense. Going up against the Cardinals, this was a very tough game for the Rams. For some reason, Sean McVay, in my opinion, really kind of failed them in this game. They continued to kick field goal after field goal instead of Sean McVay growing a pair and going for it like once or twice inside of that game and trying to put the ball into the end zone to ultimately win the game up against the Cardinals. But instead, they elect to play the game a little bit safe. The Cardinals win, and the Rams players didn't play all that great compared to how I believed that this would be a back and forth kind of shootout affair between Matthew Stafford and Kyler Murray. So Cooper Kupp has a down game, but I do definitely expect him to bounce back this week up against a not so hot Seattle Seahawks defense. For Robert Woods, he finally has a good game. In week number 1, he got the bailout special with the touchdown. In week number 4, maybe it was a similar thing, but I do believe that Robert Woods is now coming on the up and up. We all knew Robert Woods was a very talented wide receiver. It was kind of just the matter of the fact that Cooper Kupp was getting the ball so much on this team that it was hurting Robert Woods, as well as the fact that Van Jefferson and Deshaun Jackson were kind of vulturing Robert Woods at points. But I do feel like Robert Woods is a key focal point inside this offense. I think from here on out, we will feel a lot more consistent and a lot more safe starting Robert Woods every single week. So I like him this week. Up again, like I said, up against a not so hot Seattle Seahawks defense. For the Seahawks, we're sitting down Tyler Lockett. Now, I understand that Tyler Lockett played huge in week number 1 and week number 2, but in week number 3 and week number 4, the guy was taking a fucking nap inside your lineup. Now, do I believe that Tyler Lockett could easily have a big game here? 100%. But the thing about Tyler Lockett all of last season was that inconsistency. He'd have that big game, and then he's taking a nap in your lineup for the next couple of weeks. And then you finally decide, you know what, I need to sit Tyler Lockett, and the second that motherfucker graces your bench, he drops 50 points, or something crazy, like 30, 40, 50 points in those games. So, with that said, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a big game, but based upon the trend that we're going on, things aren't looking too hot for Tyler Lockett in the Seattle Seahawks offense. DK Metcalf, on the other hand, when Lockett's been snoozing, DK Metcalf has been on fire. This is going to be a tough defensive matchup for DK Metcalf, but then again, AJ Green looked amazing up against that Rams defense last week. DeAndre Hopkins played quite well as well, so I believe DK Metcalf is certainly a start-worthy wide receiver this week, even up against a fortified and tough Rams defense. Next up, we move to the beginning of the Sunday slate with the Sunday morning game in England. Who can't wait to wake up at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to watch this game? If you live in California, I don't know why you would even bother setting an alarm for this game. This game is going to be a certified snooze fest, but it does have fantasy football relevance. If you guys watched the waiver wire video from earlier today, depending on when you're watching this, from Tuesday, I talked a lot about how I like Jamison Crowder and how Jamison Crowder joining the team again after being hurt for the beginning of the season really helped out Corey Davis, and now they kind of have that 1-2 punch for the Jets offense. Now, do I believe that the Jets are just going to sail directly to the moon after having one solid game last week up against the Tennessee Titans? Probably not, right? They're probably not going to have an amazing season season. Maybe they win like 4 or 5 games, but I don't expect the Jets to magically become playoff contenders. But even if they aren't playoff contenders, going up against the Atlanta Falcons, going up against a not-so-hot defense, there should be no reason why Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder can't go to Pound Town up against the Falcons, just like they did in the previous week up against the Tennessee Titans. I like Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder a bunch. It seemed like Jamison Crowder really helped open up the field for Corey Davis to have a game a lot like he had in week number 1 up against the Panthers. For the Falcons, I'm going to be firing up Calvin Ridley. Now, if you're wondering about Cordarrelle Patterson, I'm going to be talking about him in the running back start or sit video because he is listed as a running back on NFL. On some websites, he's a running back or a wide receiver. I guess, who the fuck needs Julio Jones, right? When you have Cordarrelle Patterson, the second coming of Randy Moss, out there on the football field. I mean, wow. It is shocking how good Cordarrelle Patterson looks. The guy is a zillion years old. He's been in the league for so long, and he's finally having a breakout in, his 10th year in the NFL? But it is what it is. He's playing great. He's a start-worthy guy. If you're talking about him as a wide receiver, I'm willing to play him. Calvin Ridley, he's going to be a start as well. Now, Calvin Ridley has been a disappointment thus far this season. Now, he hasn't been a complete and utter bust where you're like, holy shit, why did I draft Calvin Ridley? But in the back of your head, you're like, wow, this is not going too well for Calvin Ridley. Why is Cordarrelle Patterson seeing so much work in this offense? Why is Calvin Ridley not being peppered with targets like he was last year when Julio Jones went down? I'm not sure, but this is going up against the Jumbo Jets defense. So if Calvin Ridley was to ever just have a revitalization of his season, it would be this week up against the Jumbo Jets for Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. And the other Falcons, I don't think Russell Gage is going to play. I don't think Russell Gage is going to get the nod to play in this game as he is banged up against the Jets. So Olamide Zaccheaus would be the second wide receiver on the team, and he would be a no-go for me, even in a very soft matchup up against the Jets, just because of how involved Mr. Cordarrelle Patterson is in this offense. Next up, we move to the beginning of the Sunday afternoon slate, the 1 p.m. games, Eastern Standard Time. We got the Detroit Lions at the Minnesota Vikings. In this game, I like Justin Jefferson as well as Adam Thielen for the Minnesota Vikings. KJ Osborne has been relatively decent, but even in a soft matchup up against the Lions, I'm just not too sure if the ball is ever really going to be consistently thrown his way. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a big game in this spot, but my best bet would be sitting him down this week. I think Courtland could have a big game here as well for the Vikings. Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen are must-start wide receivers every single week. This week, they draw a very bad Detroit Lions defense, so I expect Jefferson as well as Adam Thielen to have huge weeks this week. For the Lions, Khalif Raymond appears right now to be the wide receiver 1 on the team. But if you asked me like 2 weeks ago, I would have told you it was Quintez Cephas. So who really knows who the locked and loaded wide receiver 1 is on this team? Now, this is a great matchup up against the Vikings. So if you're down tremendous at wide receiver, you're in a really deep league, and you need kind of a deep dart throw that maybe you can pick up off the waiver wire, then go with Khalif Raymond. But in most leagues, in most 14-team leagues, I'm not looking to start Khalif Raymond this week, as well as I'm sitting down Quintez Cephas. And like I said, I like Jefferson and Thielen a lot. So my thoughts on KJ Osborne is I'll probably just sit him down on the week because he just really has not shown that true consistency throughout the season. Next up, we get the New Orleans Saints at the Washington Football Team. The Washington Football Team defense is a complete and utter fucking dumpster fire. They have these great names. They got Chase Young, but it doesn't seem to matter at all. Oh my gosh. I don't know if you guys were watching that Washington football game. I don't know why. It just clicked in my mind. But did anyone see that roughing the passer call on Chase Edmonds? The guy didn't, not on Chase Edmonds, on Chase Young. The guy didn't even fucking touch Matt Ryan, and they called roughing the passer. That was the worst call I have seen all weekend. And actually, that's a lie, because the worst call was the taunting penalty on Darren Waller when he spikes the ball on the sideline, not even at the player. He's spiking the ball at the other team's bench where no one is sitting, and magically that's a penalty. The officiating in the NFL is horrible. I apologize for going on these rants in these videos, but what the hell is happening in the NFL with the officiating? They need to bring back the replacement ref. So in this game for the Saints versus the Washington Football Team, you're going to be firing up Mr. Scary F1 Terry McLaurin, who went balls deep in the Atlanta Falcons defense last week in that winning effort when they came back up against the Falcons. Terry McLaurin has been a very solid asset to your team week in and week out, and I don't see why you would ever want to sit Terry McLaurin. This matchup up against the Saints is definitely confusing because the Saints defense defense is basically just every other week they have a good game. So in week number 1 up against the Packers, that defense looks unreal. They completely shut down Aaron Rodgers, they shut down Aaron Jones, and they virtually also shut down Davante Adams. Then in week number 2, Carolina Panthers, Mono Man Sam, they have a fucking field day on the Saints. Then in week number 3, the Saints defense looks great up against the Patriots. And then last week, the Saints defense doesn't look good at all. So maybe they'll have a great game this week, and it's just in every other week, but in my opinion, you still have to start Mr. Scary, Terry McLaurin. Last week up against the Saints, Marquez Callaway had a solid game. He only had 2 catches, got above 70 yards, and only had 2 targets. So how reliable is that week in and week out if you're just relying on the long ball? Now up against the Washington football team, it is entirely possible that the defense fucking crumbles like a cookie, and Callaway has a great game. But at the end of the day, I don't really want to rely on that, so he's a sit on the bench, as is his teammate, Diontae Harris. Now, Curtis Samuel is a player that I talked about as a wide receiver that I'm fine with picking up off the waiver wire. Now, he missed the first 3 games of the season because of an injury, so he was on the IR. He returns last week up against the Atlanta Falcons, and he doesn't play all that well. He has 4 receptions on 4 targets for like 15, 16, 17 yards, something like that, so he doesn't have a big game, but I do expect him to be involved in this offense with Logan Thomas dealing with the hamstring injury, but how involved will he be? I'm not too sure, so I'd rather kind of let him have a good game on my bench rather than start him and him being the exact same guy he was last week and not putting up a solid game. Before we get on into the next game, I would like to ask if you have ended up enjoying thus far to please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below if you are new, and whether you are new or not, please make sure you hit that like button down below. I would appreciate it a ton. It really helps this video out, helps me out a ton. So I love you guys. So thank you guys if you guys were able to do that. Next game here, we got the New England Patriots at the Houston Texans, and this game is about as slanted in one direction as the fucking headline is here with the Patriots and the Texans. I don't know why it's so heavily pushed to the left. That's on the graphics department, aka me, who ended up doing that, but that's funny because it made for a funny joke because this game is really tilted in the Patriots direction. This is going to be a one-sided affair. The Houston Texans defense is fucking atrocious. The Houston Texans offense, outside of Brandon Cooks, is bad. Going up against the Buffalo Bills, they put up a goose egg. They scored 0 fucking points. Brandon Cooks still didn't have a disaster of a day, but that was by far his worst game of the season up against the Patriots. It is a tough matchup, but I still think Brandon Cooks being the #1 wideout on the team and the only kind of semblance of talent on the team, the ball just happens to always go his way, so I think Brandon Cooks will be fine this week, despite the fact that the Texans absolutely stink. For the Patriots, I'm firing up both Nelson Aguilar as well as Jacoby Myers. Now, up to this point in the season, it really does seem like Mystic Mac Jones prefers to throw the ball the way of Jacoby Myers, and Jacoby Myers will be the wide receiver 1, at least in terms of targets from here on out. But with that said, they are drawing the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans defense sucks complete and utter donkey peen, so I expect Nelson Aguilar as well as Jacoby Myers to have great games, but inevitably one of them will have a down game because Kendrick Bourne finds his way into the end zone yet again. Next game, we got a electric matchup between the Dolphins and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and when I say electric, I mean this one's like a fucking electric shock because this one is going to be a doozy. I believe that the Dolphins, as a Dolphins fan, are going to get absolutely skull-fucked by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, if Tom Brady didn't beat the Patriots last week, the Buccaneers might have literally scored 72 points. I'm talking about Alabama versus some team that is just like, they have like 7 people that go to, like, Alabama versus a community college, Alabama versus the JV team at a local high school, because the Buccaneers would have absolutely destroyed the Dolphins. I could have seen that coming from a mile away, but Tom won that game, so I don't think he will be as brutal in this one, but I do expect the Bucs to score a bunch of points. With that said, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, as well as Antonio Brown are must-starts when they're all healthy. You play them every single week. Now, there is a solid chance that every single week, one of those guys ends up falling out of favor because, hey, maybe he doesn't score that touchdown, or maybe he doesn't get as many receptions because maybe Godwin has the big game, Evans has the all-right game, and then Antonio Brown falls off the edge of the cliff. But without Rob Gronkowski, kind of like we saw last week, all 3 of them were relatively solid for fantasy football, so I expect a solid game here, even if the Dolphins have a pretty solid defense on paper. For the Dolphins, without Will Fuller, I'm still pretty comfortable starting Jalen Waddle. The Buccaneers' defense is good and all, but they're pretty injured right now, and they tend to allow a bunch of yards defensively through the passing game. I expect Jalen Waddle to probably have like 40 yards in this game, but 7 1,000 receptions because he just gets so many targets, whether it's Jacoby Brissett or Tua Tagovailoa under center. In this game, it will be Mr. Jacoby Brissett. Tua hopefully activated next week so this offense doesn't look as bad as it looked up against the Colts. While I don't like Devontae Parker as a player, while I don't believe his future is in Miami, the dude made some legitimate grown-ass man catches up against the Indianapolis Colts. Will Fuller did end up breaking his thumb, so he is currently listed as week to week, so it is highly unlikely that he plays in this game, which will lead to Devontae Parker becoming the wide receiver 2 and giving him fantasy relevance on the week. But when Will Fuller returns, and when Will Fuller is at his full power, where he's getting those deep down the field throws and he's getting more targeted inside the offense, getting a higher target share, a heightened target share, I believe Devontae Parker will fall out of relevance. Next up, we got the Green Bay Packers at the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals beat the Jaguars, came out from out of nowhere, destroyed the Jaguars at the end of the game. They hurt him so bad that Urban Meyer decided to go to the bar, cheat on his wife, do all types of crazy shit. And, you know, it was funny to see on Twitter, but I do feel bad for Urban Meyer's wife. I don't know if you guys saw the video, but it appeared that Urban Meyer was trying to get his thumb up that woman's booty hole, so that was quite the video to watch. And obviously, did you guys, you know what was even funnier now? We might want to just talk about it more when we get to the Jaguars. Urban Meyer's apology was like when a little kid gets in trouble in school, and I'll just reenact it. He's just like staring at the ground, like they're asking him about this. He's like, oh man, I'm sorry, blah, 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 blah. And he's like staring at his feet like he just got in trouble, like yelled at by his kindergarten teacher. It was the funniest thing I've seen all week, so make sure you guys do check out that video if you haven't seen it. But back into the focus of this video, the Packers at the Bengals. Higgins could potentially make his return in this game. Now, I will just discuss this very briefly. If Higgins does not play, then you slot in Tyler Boyd. If T. Higgins is to play, then you play Higgins and you sit Tyler Boyd. It seems like all three of these guys are very talented wide receivers and could all have a big game, but when Higgins is in the lineup, it seems like he is the clear number 1 or number 2 guy. Same thing with Jamar Chase, could be the number 1 or number 2 guy, and typically Tyler Boyd is the odd man out in this offense. He's still a great player, but in this game, if Higgins is playing, I definitely prefer to play him and Jamar Chase over Tyler Boyd. For the Green Bay Packers, Davante Adams, obviously that's a no-brainer. You play that motherfucker every single week. The Bengals defense looked atrocious at the beginning of the game up against the Jaguars, and they finally started to kind of figure things out after the second half when they ended up beating the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I do expect Davante Adams to still have a huge game. Randall Cobb played very big last week up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but how reliable is that despite Aaron Rodgers wanting to bring Randall Cobb back to the team in the offseason? That was kind of a big talking point about Aaron Rodgers returning, was him bringing back Randall Cobb for some fucking reason. Randall Cobb's had one great game this season, and it seems like Aaron Rodgers just divvies up the ball so much, and a majority of the time it's going to Davante Adams, that regardless of who the wide receiver 2 is in Green Bay, they just don't really have any fantasy relevance, and I'm not even sure week in and week out that the number 2 wide receiver in targets will be Randall Cobb, so he's going to be a sit, as will be Tyler Boyd, for the reasons I explained earlier. Next up, we move to the team that just got beaten down by the Green Bay Packers, the Broncos at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Both of these teams coming off of an L. The Broncos lost to the Ravens, and the Steelers lost to the Packers like we just discussed. Courtland Sutton was down tremendous last game. Horsecock Drew Lock is going to likely be the starting quarterback in this game, as Teddy Bridgewater appears like he's going to be missing some time. Now, that could either immensely destroy Sutton's value or immensely boost it up. Now, in terms of safety, I would say Courtland Sutton's safety is now much lower. He is much more risky. But the upside might be higher because Horsecock Drew Lock kind of does that thing where he's going to drop back. He's going to be like, fuck it, Courtland Sutton's out there somewhere. Kind of like when Derek Carr just heaves the ball 6,000 yards down the field to Henry Ruggs and he's somehow down there. It's that kind of a move. Or fuck it, when Patrick Mahomes says fuck it, Tyreek Hill's out there somewhere and just heaves it down there. That's kind of what Drew Lock does. So I believe that Courtland Sutton could have a big game. The Steelers defense is pretty solid, so this is definitely a risky start, but in a lot of scenarios, I will be willing to start Courtland Sutton this week. The Steelers, Big Ben Roethlisberger needs to just go to the retirement home. He needs to hang up the cleats because it is embarrassing how bad he looked. He looked terrible up against the Packers, looked terrible the week before. This Pittsburgh Steelers offense is a complete and utter dumpster fire. Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers were looking at each other like they wanted to just absolutely go fucking rail each other after the game. I don't know if you saw it. They were like smiling at each other. It was pretty weird to watch, but maybe that leans to the fact that, hey, the Steelers are going to get Aaron Rodgers after this year, which would be fucking crazy. But maybe there's some validity to a lot of that kind of news that we heard and some of those rumors that we heard throughout the offseason. So Diontae Johnson, despite Big Ben sucking complete and utter ass in the game last week and not being too hot, Diontae Johnson's still the main target. Diontae Johnson is still going to be peppered with targets aggressively by Big Ben. So Diontae Johnson could still have a good game, even if the Steelers get bitch slapped by the Denver Broncos. For the Broncos, Tim Patrick is going to be a sit. Chase Claypool, will he play? Will he not play? Didn't end up going last week. I have no idea what to think about Chase Claypool in this game. Same thing with Juju. The team is just so bad offensively that unless you're Diontae Johnson, I just don't really feel good starting anyone besides Najee Harris and Diontae Johnson because of the amount of volume they see in this offense. Speaking of Juju, Juju looked so mad in that game on the bench. He was like, this is all Ben's fault or something. That's just to kind of summarize what he said. People were reading his lips. He's like, this is all Ben's fault. This motherfucker Ben. Juju Smith-Schuster was actually getting a lot of targets in the game. He just wasn't getting any catches because, again, Big Ben just seems to only be dialed on figuring out how to throw the ball accurately to Diontae Johnson or to Najee Harris. So for right now, unless Big Ben is able to figure things out relatively soon, I'm sitting all the other Steelers not named Najee Harris, like I said, and Diontae Johnson. Next up, we move to the Philadelphia Eagles at the Carolina Panthers. In this game, we're going to fire up Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith looked great up against the Kansas City Chiefs last week. The Panthers defense got pounded out. They literally, what is their like slogan? It's like pound that, something like that, pound the rock, something like that. I don't know. They have the Panther. And he hits, keep pounding. The Panthers defense got keep pounded all game long by the Dallas Cowboys. I think that the Philadelphia Eagles could play solid in this spot. I think Devontae Smith is the clear wide receiver one there, and he is the only player I want to trust on the Eagles offense besides Jalen Hurts. For the Panthers, DJ Moore, it doesn't matter who is covering him. Trayvon Diggs last week, that guy's on fire. He has so many interceptions, but up against DJ Moore is just so fucking good. I talked about this a lot with DJ Moore this season. He finally figured it out. In the past 2 years, he's been a great wide receiver, but not for fantasy because he can't find the end zone because he just struggles to get into the end zone. And this year, he's scoring. He is scoring like his name was Terry F1 scoring McLaurin. He is scoring all the fucking time. DJ Moore is an unreal talent. He is going to destroy the Philadelphia Eagles. DJ Moore might be inside of my top 5 wide receivers on the week. But guess who's not going to be in the top 5? Guess who's probably not even in my top 50? Robbie Anderson. Despite him and Mono Man Sam having that connection dating back to the Jumbo Jets, it doesn't seem to matter at all because he is irrelevant in this offense. Christian McCaffrey could be there. Christian McCaffrey could be in the fucking hospital, and it doesn't matter because Robbie Anderson isn't going to be seeing any targets. Back to Christian McCaffrey, though. The guy might actually play this week. If that's true, doesn't affect my opinion on DJ Moore. Just looks like a good spot for him to have a very big game. Jalen Reagor, any of these other Eagles receivers not named Devontae Smith are very risky just because of how involved the tight end is in this offense. And it's not even the tight end. It's both tight ends. Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz are heavily involved week in and week out for the Eagles. Next up, we got the Tennessee Titans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. And in this game, I'm going to be firing up A.J. Brown or Julio Jones and Julio Jones if they end up suiting up. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones were out last week. They lose that game to the Jets. But honestly, the reason why they lost was not because the Titans are like some dumpster fire of a team, but because they didn't have the wide receivers. The Jaguars defense is bad. Urban Meyer is down bad. If either of them play, I feel like you have to play them in this game. And for the Jaguars, with DJ Chark out for the foreseeable future, potentially out for the season, I don't want to necessarily say that because I don't remember off the top of my head, but he's gone for a while. Laviska Shenault finally saw usage. He finally figured it out. Urban Meyer figured out in the last 2 weeks how to use James Robinson and how to accurately use Laviska Shenault. It's amazing. It's amazing. Laviska and Marvin Jones are both going to be starts for me on the week. If it was gun to the head, which one should you start? I would say Marvin Jones over Laviska Shenault, but Shenault looked very good last week up against the Bengals. Next up, we got the Cleveland Browns at the LA Chargers. Now, Mike Williams, on his birthday, no less, absolutely, he had birthday sex, but it was with all of our lineups who started him because he got like 4 points in that game after continuously dropping like 30 points every game. What the hell happened? But it really wasn't all his fault because he was wide open. Justin Herbert, the pervert, sailed the ball over him. That would have been a touchdown, but it's okay. it's okay, because this week I'm firing him back up against the Browns. Keenan Allen was heavily targeted, didn't have all that great of a game. Eckler was the one who heavily was the big benefactor of that big Chargers game last week, but I still think Allen and Mike Williams are starters every single week. Odell Beckham Jr., you motherfucker. I finally buy back in to Odell Beckham Jr. I'm finally telling everyone to start him. I dubbed him as a must start, and this man did me dirty. This man does it every time. Every time I finally... No, actually, it's not every time, because I completely discredited him all of last year, all of the year before, but I finally bought in this year for one game up against the Minnesota Vikings, and he just plastered me. He absolutely eviscerated my brain, because I started Odell in DFS. I thought he was going to have a good game, and he disappointed. Now that I'm off of Odell, he'll probably have a humongous game. He'll probably hang 40 points on the Chargers, but despite that, I don't want to start him this week. I do not want to start him at all. I don't trust him. The Browns just like to run the ball too much for Odell to have too much value. Donovan Peoples-Jones is also a sit. Maybe when Jarvis Landry comes back, he'll be a start-worthy wide receiver. Next up, we got the Bears at the Las Vegas Raiders, who are for some reason in a stadium. Nope, that was the LA Chargers stadium. That is a dome, but can have weather delays. I don't know. I don't understand that, but that's how it was. So with the Bears, Laser calling the plays now instead of Matt Nagy. The question is it going to be Justin Fields? Is it going to be Andy Dalton? Now, my best bet is that Fields is the guy, but with Matt Nagy, you never know. You never know. So it could be Mr. Justin Fields in this game, or it could be Andy Dalton. Again, my best bet is Fields, but you never really know. So Darnell, here comes the Mooney, seems to be the #1 wide receiver for Justin Fields instead of Allen Robinson. If you drafted Allen Robinson because I told you to, I'm very sorry. He literally was productive with Nick Foles. He was productive with Kiss and Titties Mitchell Trubisky. He was productive with Blake Garbage Time Bortles, but he can't do it with Justin Fields. I apologize. Hopefully things change for Robinson, but right now you just can't reasonably start him. Darnell Mooney seems like the wide receiver 1. I'll play him up against the Raiders defense, who just got plowed out by the Chargers. For the Raiders, Hunter Renfrow. Oh man, Hunter Renfrow is a tactician with it. If you guys have seen, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago up against the Dolphins, he shattered either Byron Jones or Xavier Howard's ankles. Last week, he laid the hit stick on that guy. They did like the fake punt, and they threw the ball. The Chargers throw the ball, and Hunter Renfrow just levels the guy. Hunter Renfrow played very good in that game. Hunter Renfrow is just a legitimate wide receiver. Henry Ruggs is a good player, but you have to really hope that that deep ball connects, that he catches that big play, 50 yards and a touchdown, because if he doesn't, then he will not have a big game, and, that's kind of a high-risk, high-reward maneuver. So if you want to start Ruggs, I understand why, but personally, I'm looking to sit him this week. Next up, we got the 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals. In this game, I like Deebo Samuel, and I will be sitting Brandon Ayuk for the 49ers. Now, Brandon Ayuk, he escapes the doghouse, but last week, it wasn't that he got put back in the doghouse, but he just didn't play all that well. It's finally Trey Lance season in San Francisco. How long does that last? What do you guys think in the comment section? Do you think that now that Jimmy Garoppolo is hurt, that when he returns, that he's going to be riding the pine? Or that he gets thrown back into the lineup? My opinion is that if Lance looks good, then Lance remains the starter. But if Lance kind of has a little bit of a hiccup, doesn't play all that well, then Jimmy Garoppolo will remain the starter of the team. Deebo has been unreal week in and week out for fantasy football. Doesn't matter if it's Trey Lance. Doesn't matter if it's Jimmy Garoppolo. Doesn't matter if Big Dick Beathard, I don't even know if he's on the team anymore. If he was the starter, I would believe in Deebo Samuel. I like him here up against the Cardinals. For the Cardinals, D-Hop has been kind of on slow sledding as of recently. Hasn't played all that well. Maybe it's because of the injury. I'm still firing him up this week. You can go wrong. You can go very wrong sitting DeAndre Hopkins, because even if he gets just like 10, 12 points, that's not going to lose you your week. And if you bench him, he'll probably end up scoring like 40 points. So go ahead and fire up Mr. D-Hop this week. For the Cardinals, I'm also starting AJ Green, but let me tell you, I've been wrong every week with this other receiver starting the Cardinals. It seems like Green is the #2 guy there, but then magically this week it'll be Rondale Moore or Christian Kirk. So take it very lightly when I tell you to start AJ Green. And like I said, Brandon Ayuk may have escaped the doghouse, but I'm just not 100% certain that he is going to be a viable option week in and week out, because he has not shown that yet this season. Next up, we got an NFC East matchup between the New York Football Giants, who are now 1-3. Got their first win, though. Congrats to the Giants, going up against the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys defense is good. Sam Darnold looked good up against them, but they are still good. still very good. Kenny Golladay had a big week last week because Shepard and Darius Slayton did not play. Now, they're both listed as questionable in this game, but it is certainly possible that they both end up missing. So with that said, if they miss, then I'm comfortable starting Golladay. If they play, I'm still going to start him, but I'm nowhere near as comfortable. If you have other options other than Golladay, he's kind of a bottom of the barrel start in my opinion, but he did look really good last week. Looked like the old Kenny Golladay from Detroit for the Cowboys. Oh man, Nick, CeeDee Lamb. Oh, what the fuck's been happening with CeeDee Lamb? He sucked last week. Can you start him this week up against the Giants? And my answer would be yes, he did suck last week, but I'm still firing him up with all confidence. Him and Amari Cooper, they're on the Cowboys. The Cowboys got a great offense. The Cowboys could throw 5 touchdowns in this game, and CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper could win you your week. So fire them both up. I understand that it is annoying when Zeke scores like 2 touchdowns, or when Zeke is scoring, or with this fucking Dalton Schultz motherfucker keeps vulturing the touchdowns, but it is what it is. Continue to fire up Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Next game here, we got the Colts at the Baltimore Ravens. In this game, Michael Pittman for the Colts. I'm going to be firing him up this week. I like him up against the Ravens. I didn't like him last week up against the Dolphins. I was wrong. He's clearly the #1 wide receiver there. Carson Wentz is all right. It is what it is. I don't feel ultra comfortable starting him, but I will start him because he is the #1 wide receiver, and Wentz seems to be throwing the ball his way a lot. Hollywood Brown. A lot of people last week, they got a little bit too cute. They started to sit down Hollywood Brown. I told you guys, don't worry. Don't worry. Be happy. Hollywood Brown's going to score a fucking touchdown. Hollywood Brown is going to get the ball because he was up against the Lions, the game where he really disappointed immensely. Should have had 2 touchdowns. He dropped the ball. I said that's not going to happen again. Hollywood Brown has a solid game last week. Going to have another solid one here up against the Colts defense. That looked good up against the Dolphins, but I know that that defense is bad. The Dolphins just stink offensively. Zach Pascal, sit for me for the Colts. And the Ravens, my sit is going to be Sammy Watkins because you never really know what's going to happen with Sammy Watkins. I just realized that I definitely fucked that up a little bit. So this was Monday Night Football. We're going to go back to Sunday Night Football now for the next video. That will be flipped around, so I do apologize for that. So Sunday Night Football between the boy, Mr. Flash Gordon. He's back. Flash Gordon versus the Bills. And while I love Flash Gordon, while I want Josh Gordon to have a huge game, just sit him down, temper your expectations. If he has a big game, if he is the true wide receiver 2 in Kansas City, that Hardman could never be, that Demarcus Robinson never have been, that Byron, the Chip King himself, Byron Pringle could never be, then maybe Josh Gordon start worthy from here on out. But right now, temper your expectation, temper the love you have for Josh Gordon, and sit him down. So don't play him, don't play McCole Hardman. So don't play any of the other Chiefs wide receivers, but play Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill dropped a 50-burger, I believe, maybe 45-burger, something like that. He dropped a deuce in that game up against the Eagles defense. I expect him to play well again. Doesn't matter about the defensive matchup. You start Tyreek Hill. You also start Stephon Diggs, regardless of the defensive matchup. Has looked a lot better recently when compared to the beginning of the season. And the other Buffalo Bills wide receiver I want to start is Emmanuel Sanders because he's getting over 6+ targets every single game. Week 1, Week 2, Week 3, Week 4, all over 6 targets. While he is not the clear wide receiver 2, because they have Beasley, they have Gabe Davis, they also have Dawson Knox one time, if you are with me, who scored 1 million touchdowns. But Emmanuel Sanders is still a usable piece in this offense, as he has been consistent week in and week out, and has the upside to be a top 24 wide receiver. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you do hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. I would appreciate it a ton. I love each and every single one of you guys. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day, and as always, goodbye.